Good morning, everybody. I'm going to try something out here. A little word of the day, if you will. So last night I came across the word gagitese. Okay, that's the root form. It's a VAI, so it conjugates like michiso. So we have nigagitesin, kigagitesin, gagitesu, or gagitesio, depending on your dialect. And that's spelled K long A, K long I, T I S I. That's the root of it, and it means to be sore or kind of achy or painful. And so the sentence that came up last night was Ispik kawaniskayan nigagitesin. When I had woken up, or maybe there was geeksape in there, geeksape iwaniskayan nigagitesin. In the morning, as I was waking up, I was sore. And just a few other notes on gagitese. It ends in ISI, right? So that means it's a stative verb, or what we would consider probably an adjective or an adverb in English. It describes a state. So this is similar to words like ayagaskese. Ayagask meaning wide or broad, and ise meaning like in thus state. So ayagaskeso is like she or he is wide or she or he is broad. So the same thing with gagit. Gagit is likely the part that means achy or sore, and ise means thus, in thus state, when it's in that part of the word. So just that another thing to keep in mind, because what we'll do is we'll do a bunch of these ISI words. They're words with this ISI morpheme at the end, and they all conjugate the same way, and they all describe the state of something, the current state of something. So not a motion, but a state. Nigagitesin, kigagitesin, gagitesu. And since I have 1 minute before I have to run into work, let's do a couple more practice sentences. So I'll go over the other two, or the ones I already gave. Speak kawaniskayan nigagitesin. When I woke up, I was sore. I'm gonna make another one up on the fly here. Gisimetoyan, or gisimetoyan nigagitesin. As I finished playing, I was sore. Kinues e sesoipahtayan utagusik me guats nigagitesin. For a long time I ran for exercise last night, and now I'm sore. Nigagitesin, I am sore. Gigagitesin, you are sore. Gagiteso, she or he is sore. Have a great day, everybody, and practice these words. Feel free to send a video of you trying to say them if you are so brave.
It's 5 minutes before I have to go. To work. Maga, notes, apsisiso. That's the word of the day today, apsisiso. So many people know the word apsis, which means a little bit. And if you add that ISI, the same ISI from yesterday's word, gagiteso, that same ise at the end, you're going to get to be in a state of whatever the previous morpheme is. So in this case, to be in the state of little, or to be little. So apsisiso is she or he is little. So if we look at the page here, it conjugates exactly the same as yesterday's word. So we have nitapisisin, kitapisisin, apsiso, nitapisisin, kitapisisin, apsiso. What's the gods? Just a couple other quick notes with apsiso. It starts with a vowel, so when we use ni or ki, we have to add a T connector in there. There's some regional differences with that. Other people use different letters, but for the general, many of the dialects we use T. So instead of nitapisisin, it becomes nitapisisin, kitapisisin. But then in the third person, there's nothing, so we don't have a T there because there's nothing to connect to, so it's just apsiso. And then for the sentences today, we have apsiso apagosis e wapamak. The mouse is small, the one that I'm seeing, or the mouse that I'm seeing is small, in other words. And then to log this to yesterday's word, otagosi kewaniskayan egagitesian nawapamao apagosis kapsisasit. So yesterday as I woke up, and as I was sore, I saw a mouse that was small. Hamaga, kegatse gisimini koyan. But have fun and practice those two words, gagitese and apsisiso. And tomorrow we're going to keep adding more words with this ISI, this morpheme that means to be in a state of this. Just a little note too, Some languages actually classify their verbs based on what they describe. So some languages will classify motion verbs versus stative verbs, stative verbs, versus other sorts of verbs. Cree doesn't generally do that in the literature, but this ISI morpheme would be technically a stative verb. So if that helps to think of it that way, if you're trying to describe something and you realize it's a state somebody is in, you could probably start looking with words that end in ISI. The other thing is, when we do a couple of these, we're going to chop the ISI off, and we only have to learn that little bit at the beginning. So good luck. Kagitase and apsisase.
Tanse kakio Mo estas anots chigan. It's late tonight as I make a movie, but I was busy all day doing other things. So today's word of the day is asponiso. Asponiso. Okay, this is another word that ends in ISI. That's describing the state of something animate. And in this case, aspon is to be greedy or covetous or stingy. So that's like stingy, aspon, and then you add the isse, to be in thus state, and then you add in whatever conjugation you want in that. So asponisse is like the imperative form, like be stingy, as if you were telling someone, go be stingy. I don't know. Anyway, but if you put a W on the end, you get asponisso or asponiso, depending on your dialect, and that means she or he is stingy. So just to kind of demonstrate this with writing, so here we have asponiso, right? So we have aspon, the greediness, then we have the morpheme here, isse, for thus being thus way, and then the W means the 3S. And so if we take this piece here without the W, that's the part that's highlighted here, we notice it's the same in all the words. So if we were going to do I'm stingy, you would say nitasponesin. Again, the T is added here because asponiso and starts with a vowel, so there's this connector T. Nitasponesin, kitasponesin, asponiso. Okay, and I put beside them, these are just like yesterday's words. They conjugate the same way. Nitapsisesin, kitapsisesin, apsiseso. Okay, so that was I'm small, you're small, she or he is small. Nitasponesin, kitasponesin, asponiso. That is I'm stingy, you're stingy, she or he is stingy. And then just to put it into context, Kaya sponese nuitamak megi, minin anege anoskanak. Don't be stingy. Kana sponese nuitamag megi, minin anege anoskanak. Don't be stingy, Maggie told me. Give me those raspberries. Kana asponese nuitamag Maggie, minin anege anoskanak. Okay, and then the second sentence, I changed it here just so that we have it in the same mode of conjugation that I did up here. Anisk eki minak anoskanak, mona nitasponesin. Because I had given the raspberries, I am not stingy. Okay, anisk eki minak anoskanak, mona nitasponesin. So all together, Gana sponese nuitamag megi, minin anage anoskanak. Anisk eki minak anoskanak, mona nitasponesin. Hey, danse kia kakio kiwao, kinawao. Danse kakio kinawao. Gonna do N dialect here. Anotes itoiwen. Kimoteso. Okay, it means to be sly or sneaky. Kimot being the sly or sneaky part. Isse is again that part that means to be thus or to be in such a way, exist in such a way. And the W at the end is the 3S conjugation. We always do it in that form because that's how it's listed in the dictionary. So kimoteso, and I'm going to do another video here kind of showing it on paper. Kimoteso. Okay, so let's take a quick look here. Kimoteso is the word. So we look at kimot in the yellow. That's the part that means sly or sneaky. Isse, again, is that part that means to be in such a state or to be thus way. So if we break that up, it's right here. And then I wrote it like one of the words from the other day. So nikimotesin, I'm sneaky, I'm sly. It's just like how we conjugated nitasponesin, I'm stingy or greedy. Kikimotesin, kitasponesin. And we can see that the pieces are exactly the same. Kimoteso, asponiso. So looking at the colors, there's really three parts to these words. But if you notice, the orange and the green are always the same, so we just have to learn the yellow part. And for some sentences, ayaskao kimoteso ember, note michsoche. Sometimes Ember is sneaky if she wants to eat. Kana kimotese uitamo enne totaman. Don't be sneaky.
Tell me and the last one. Gana kimotese Maggie. Kawapametin ne kimochim michiin nemichuin. Don't be sneaky, Maggie. I saw you, or I see you, as you sneakily eat my food. And notice here, kimoche is in yellow as well, because it's the same part, just in how it's added to the word changes it. So we're adding an I to it because it's a preverb, and the next verb starts with a consonant. So we add the I, but the I actually has a palatizing effect, or it changes the T into a C to put it easier. So when you add an I in this position, some T's will change to a C. So at first glance, those don't look anything the same. Kimotese, kimoche, but they actually are the exact same part now that we know that the T changes to a C. So again, kana kimotese Maggie, kawapametin e kimoche michiin nemichuin.
Good morning, everyone. Today's word of the day is gagipataso. Gagipataso. And it means to be like silly or foolish or some such thing. So I'll start another video here, turn the camera around, and we'll talk about how it's spelt and all that good stuff. So today's word of the day, gagipataso. Gagipataso, and there's three parts. Gagipat, which is the initial, isse, which is the final, and the inflection of the W for 3S. She or he is thus being silly, is existing in a silly way. So we can see the three parts here colored. So ne gagepatasin, ke gagepatasin, gagepataso. And this is just the same conjugation as ne kimutisin, ke kimutisin, kimotuso. Just like yesterday's word. And our two example sentences are, what's the gats? Ayaskal gagepataso ben megietuel. Gana gagepatase ben namona kimutisin pewichihin etuel Maggie. So the first sentence, what's the gats? Ayaskal gagepataso ben megietuel. What's the gats? Ayaskal gagepataso ben megietuel. Holy moly, sometimes Ben sure is silly, Maggie said. The other one is, Gana gagepatase ben namona kimutisin pewichihin etuel Maggie. So this is the imperative form. Notice there's no green, there's no inflection, so it's the base form. So it's how you say like a command, like be silly. So in this case, don't be silly, Ben. You are not sneaky. Come help me, said Maggie. Okay, your turn, you all. Try and use gagepatase in a sentence, or just, say gagepatasin. That's good enough. That means you're silly. Or just try it out, see if you can, and if you're feeling brave, send a video. It'd be nice to not be the only one here. Kinawao, notes, gisewataso is the word of the day. Gisewataso, and this means to be kind or to be gentle in a kind way. And it breaks into a couple more morphemes. So we have gise, which is the kind part. There's a W glide, and we'll talk about that in a second. Then there's at, long AT, which means like life or breath or something along those lines. Isse is to be such a way. So in this way is to live your life in a kind way, is how that breaks down literally. But I mean, a free translation would be someone is kind. So negisewatasin, kigisewatasin, gisewataso. Nikisewatasin, I am kind. Kikisewatasin, you're kind. Kisewataso, she or he is kind. And this looks just like yesterday's negagepatasun, kigagepatasin, gagepataso. Just a note on yesterday, I didn't break this up into two morphemes yesterday, but it is technically gagape is silly, and at is to live. So like itataso is to live in such a way. Mōcikihtāl is to live in a fun, carefree, sort of reckless way. So we can add all these different words to this atiso, and this iso is the same isse as the other words. So you can see we've modified the meaning. This is like to live in such a way instead of just to be such. Anyway, to go through the example sentence, I actually made three sentences that link together, so it's like a conversation. Tapoy gisewataso Marian etuel Maggie. Kistamina kigisewatasin etuel Ben. Kinamaga kigagepatasin Ben etuel Maggie. So, truly Marian is kind, said Maggie. You too, you're kind, said Ben. But you're silly, Ben, said Maggie. Gisewataso.
Good morning, everyone. So today's word of the day is mōcikihtāl. Mōcikihtāl. So we have the morpheme much, mut that changes to a C when added to another initial. So that's like mache is to be bad or evil. At is sort of like living your life. Thus is ise, and W is the conjugation for 3S. So bad life thus, bad lifing thus. In other words, living in kind of an evil way or a bad way or a non-planned way, if you will. So the conjugations are nimachatasin, kimachatasin, machataso. And these conjugate just like nigisewatasin, kigisewatasin, kisewataso. This is yesterday's word. So for our sentences, we have Mona kimachatasin, kigisewatasin, ituel Marian. So you are not evil, you are kind, said Marian. And the second sentence is Gana machatase. Gana machatase. Don't be evil. Don't live evil. Don't be living in a way that's not right. Ituel Megi. So I just want to go, this is called an initial because it's the first morpheme. And this is called a final because it prepares the word for the inflection. But this middle part here this is called a medial. So we have an initial, a medial, and a final. And not every word has to have a medial. You need to have an initial, and you need to have a final. Sometimes the final is only one letter long, but you have to have a final. So initials and finals are mandatory, but the medials are optional. But they give a lot more options as far as the language goes. For instance, I can say something is flat, or I can specify a medial, meaning that it's flat fabric. And that it's within the medial zone that I would specify that it's fabric. Also, in Cree, you can say, my nose is very long, or you can compound in that and say, I'm long-nosing, basically. But the compounded version seems a little bit more elegant. So you could say, I can walk nikwit. So my nose, nikwit, I can walk is long, or I can walk. But you could also say nikinigotan. I'm long nosing. I have a long nose. It's more. It's a different, slightly different meaning when you compound it like that. Anyway, in that case, ikwit, the part that means nose, is a medial in the middle of the verb. So nikin ogot an. So that gut in the middle is a medial for nose. I should draw that out next week. But for right now, I just wanted to point out that this is called a medial. Any morpheme, or not any morpheme, but many morphemes in the middle. Good morning, everyone. mōcikihtāl. I hope this message finds you well. I apologize if your ringer is on. I'm going to have to start doing these at this time in the morning because I have to leave in 5 minutes to go start work. So, ask me if you need to know how to turn your ringer off for Google Meet, or turn off notifications. That way I won't wake you up. Otherwise, if it becomes a real problem, I can maybe try and do these later tonight. Anyway, today's word of the day is actually not going to be a word of the day. I'm going to review what we did and show you a way that we can put it in, show you a way that we can study it more effectively. So I'll just switch the camera over on the next video. Okay, so in reviewing all these words, you can see that the yellow parts are the same, and the green parts are the same, and the orange parts are the same, and then the medial is the same in some of them. And so what I do to study these sort of things is to kind of teach my brain how they all fit together. Just to make a chart similar to this, okay? And I've added more, so ignore the blue here. We'll get to that in a second. But we can start with any of the pink and then add the pieces we need. So it's just a way to see what's changing, right? If you only have to change 2 syllables in a word, it's a lot easier than memorizing a bunch of 7-syllable words. So to review our words, and then I'll just cover up the English here. This is a good way to study. Nigagitasin, nitapsisasin, nitasponnisin, nikimutasin, nigagepatasin, nigisewatasin, nimachatasin. And then when I go to study them, I quiz myself in my head what each one means, and then, if I follow it across. Double check the definition here on the right. Notice these definitions are only changing based on this one piece of the word. And that's really important to notice, because then we only have to learn this part of the word once we know what I call the framework, how all the pieces fit together. So this is nothing different than like a sentence in English. If you take each one of these as a different word, we're just changing, say, the verb, and everything else is staying the same. I went to the store. I sat
I went near the store, I sat near the store, I ate near the store, right? We're just changing that meaning right there. And then in addition, I wanted to show you, we have two different ways to conjugate here in Cree. We have what's called the independent mode, so nigagitisin, but we also have a mode where we can start with E, and we can go E gagitisian. So we go straight across with the blue and straight across with the pink, and then we pick one of these lines for the verb. So egagitisian, egagitisian, egagitisi. And so the difference between the two modes is how they're used phrasally, like within the actual phrase. And there's a fair amount to that. I don't want to get caught up in it right now, just because I would rather kind of get used to these first before we talk about it. But mainly, an independent clause is independent. You can't have two independent clauses in the same phrase. So if you wanted to say two things, or if you wanted to say, I am sore and you are mean at the same time, like those two concepts are happening together, you would say, nagagitisin e mōcikihtāl. So we would combine those we would combine those two contexts together by making the second one in the conjunct. In other words, it's in conjunction with the independent clause. And then just one more side note, if you skip all this stuff on the side and you just use the yellow, green, and orange, you're going to get the imperative tense, meaning like the command form. Like if I tell you, hey, sit down, that's an imperative form in English. In Cree, to say that same form to one person, like if I was just going to tell you, be sore or be small, I would say, kagitase, apsisase, asponase. I would just say the parts that highlighted in the red here. And then that's if I'm saying it to one person. There's a couple different forms, like if you're addressing plural as well, but we'll get into that later. But that's good to know. So the root form of the word is the imperative form, and then we add these pieces on to get either an independent clause or a conjunct clause. Anyway, I hope this video helps, and I love that you sent a video yesterday, Marion, and you as well, Maggie. Please feel free to keep the videos coming. It's super inspiring and motivating for me to keep going when I see you guys try.
Good morning, everyone. Today's word of the day is kiamataso. Kiamataso. And I will turn the camera around here in the next video and explain. Okay, so many people know the word kiam, and kiam can be added to the medial at and the final isse to get kiamatase, or kiamataso if you want to conjugate in the 3s. So kiam, when we use it as a particle, kind of means like disregard or never mind, or kind of in that way. When it's put together in this, it actually means so-and-so is a quiet person, which might mean that they disregard what's going on in such a way, if that can help you link it to memory. So this will conjugate to nikiamat. Oh, I didn't even spell it right. It should be nikiamatasin, kikiamatasin, kiamataso. My apologies. Now, if we go to the chart from yesterday, we'll notice in order to make this word, all we need to do is add kiam into the initial spot. And it's exactly the same framework as all of these. Why is this important? Why do I keep showing this chart? Is because if you can get this chart in your head, kind of like a multiplication chart or something, then when you see a new word like this, it's not a new word. You already noticed the different pieces that you know, and then you just have to learn that little bit. Now, many people already know kiam, so now it's actually easier for your brain to take the piece you already know and add it to the other pieces you already know. And so memory or memorization, or at least recall or synthesis, will become a lot easier in my experience. So from learning from this chart, I can say nikiamatasin, kikiamatasin, kiamataso, or I could say ikiamatisian, ikiamatisian, ikiamatisit. And then if I wanted the imperative, I would just read the part that's highlighted in red, which is kiamatase. Like, be a quiet person, live in a quiet way. So that's the chart. I would be thrilled if someone would post a video of them trying this. Notes. Hi everybody. Today we're going to study a new word, or a different word. Again, this is going to have the same structure as the last words we've been seeing, where it has isse and the W for 3s. And the word today is wawieso. right? The IW is going to sound like an O or O, depending on your region. Wawiye-so. And this means to be round, okay, like as in a circular or whatever. But there's something interesting going on here I want to point out. So I've been making these slashes in all our previous words to divide up the different pieces, okay? And these pieces here are called morphemes, or that's what we call them in linguistics. Why is that important? Well, where these slashes are, things can happen with letters. So this is going to be a bit of a grammatical one this morning, a little bit of grammatical lesson. But we call these little pieces of the word morphemes, and we call these slashes the morpheme boundary. And this is important because when we know what pieces are the morphemes, when we know where the morpheme boundaries are, and the reason that's important is because sometimes sounds change at morpheme boundaries. They don't change in different places in the word, but they change at morpheme boundaries. And this is a good example here. This word is wawiye. The initial is wawiye. And since it ends in a vowel, this vowel eats the first I of ise, and you get wawiye-so. See, there's no I there? Okay, that's not a huge change, but it's important to know why, because when you look at this word compared to another word, it doesn't look like the same piece, right? This is ESI and this is ISI, but that's because the E is eating the SI. And so there are certain letters that when next to a morpheme boundary, they change. Like a T might go to a C, or there might be a contraction. So you're probably sitting here thinking like, well, Ben, why do I care about this? Well, first of all, let me get this out of the way. This wawiye can slide into our chart just like that. So we could say nawawiyesin. Whoops, sorry, it's got to cover the I of that. There, nawawiyesin, kiwawiyesin, wawiyeso, ewawiyesian, ewawiyesian, ewawiyesiit. I said that wrong again. Ewawiyesit. There we go, ewawiyesit. Okay, so why is this important? Well, I wanted to move on to one more topic today. So far, we've only been dealing with describing animate nouns, right? So that's anything you can put awa after. So like Ben awa, this is Ben, or Maggie awa, this is Maggie, or Nitasawa, these are my pants. Pants are animate. Anoskan, or Ayoskan, if you're Y dialect, awa, this is a raspberry. Okay, and I don't want to dwell on animate nouns versus inanimate nouns, but there's just two types of nouns, right? So Ben is a type of noun, Ben awa, and the easiest one for me to remember is te tapawin oma. This is a chair. A chair is what's called an inanimate noun. It's just a different type of noun, and it uses a different piece, right? It uses oma instead of awa. And I'm not going to dwell into the reasons for that because it's interesting, but it's going to detract from the lesson. Okay, so if I wanted to describe myself and I wanted to say in the third person like Ben, he is round, I would say wawiye so Ben. Okay, we have wawiye, we have the isse, but the I got eaten, and we have the W to mean she or he, or it, they, the third person singular. But if we're talking about an inanimate noun, we use the same initial, but we use a different final. We don't use isse with an inanimate noun. We use either long A or short an. But we're going to go with long A right now, and we can describe those differences another time. But going back to the morpheme boundary and how some things can change, like we saw the E eat the I, okay? When we go here, we see this crazy Y here, and you notice there's a tick above the Y. This is a glide vowel because wawiye ends in an E, right? The sound of A. But the long A here is very important that it's heard. And so what the language does is it enters a glide vowel or a semi-vowel, depending on how you want to look at this or whose literature you're reading. This is a dialectal change. So this is going to be a Y and Y dialect. It's going to be an N and N dialect, and it's going to be a TH and TH dialect usually. Okay, why is this important? Because if we didn't have this, the E would eat the A and we'd get wawiyeo. But we need to hear ow at the end because our brains are going to pick up ow as part of this piece of the word that's really important. So we're going to get wawiyeo, wawiyeo, or wawiyenao, or wawiyedao, depending on your dialect. So to use this in a sentence, and that's the challenge for today for anyone who's brave enough to try, you pick an animate noun like a person or a moose or an animal or whatever. And so let's say mouswa, a moose, and I'd say wawiye so mouswa. The moose, she or he, the third person, the moose being the third person, is round. Wawiye so mouswa. The moose is round. Or we'd take an inanimate noun like te tapuin, the chair, and we'd say wawiye yao te tapuin. So this is going to be a fun exercise. You pick a list of 5 animate nouns and 5 inanimate nouns, and you just practice the difference between the two. But just notice that there is not much of a change. There's this one piece in orange that changes, and there's this one tricky Y in this one particular setup because the yellow word or the yellow morpheme ends in a vowel. If this yellow word ended in like a T, you would just add AW, and you would add ISI, and it'd be really simple. But it looks very different just because of this vowel E at the end of the name. So, the challenge is on. If you feel brave enough or feel comfortable enough, grab an inanimate noun and grab an animate noun and tell the world through this video chat that the inanimate noun is round and the animate noun is round. And remember, you just use the one with isse if it's the animate noun and the one with AW, long AW, if it's the inanimate noun. So, wawiye so ben, wawiye yao tita po. Good morning, everyone. And wow, great job. Thanks for taking up the challenge. Sounds great. I just wanted to run over them all real quickly here with you. So again, we're determining the quote-unquote animacy based on the demonstrative pronoun after, and we link that to the piece in the verb that tells us what it's referring to. So, pagahattoan wawiye so. Pagahattoan wawiye so. Wihkwas wawiye now. Wawiye yao. But as Maggie pointed out, you can switch that Y to an N because it's a dialectal change there in the glide. So, wihkwas wawiye now. Pisueas wawiye now. Pisueas wawiye now. Ogawe mau ski wawiye now. Ogawe mau ski wawiye now. Miski sick, and just a note, that's a long I there. Miski sick wawiye now. Miski sick. Pisim wawiye so. Pisim wawiye so. Okay, that's perfect. So I wanted to pass on another challenge. We're just using random words here. This time we have usk, which means to be raw. And notice we have the full ISI and the full A because this ends in a consonant. So our life is easy. It's when it ends in either an AW or just a consonant W or any kind of vowel that we have this whole contraction issue going. So this is actually an easier one. And I just wanted to oops, I kind of cheated. I meant to cover that up. I was hoping that you guys can do another challenge with these words and using the right word for to be raw. So tell me that the meat is raw, that the leaves are raw, that the spruce tree is raw, the spruce pitch is raw, the sugar is raw, and the salt is raw. And you know what? I'll let you cheat. There's the answers there. But we can see if we organize it something like this, we take out all the guesswork because we automatically can see the colors or however you want to do it, if you want to do it with lines or whatever. But then when we go to practice, we don't want to put this on necessarily the same line because we want our brain to actually figure out the connection. But if we have it all on one page and we have enough of a guide to link it, we can sit here and in 2 minutes I can run through these words 4 times and then I go do something else for the rest of my day and then come back 2 minutes at night I do it again, and you'd be surprised in like 2 days you'll have memorized all of these words and the connections between them. In linguistics they call that the mental lexicon, where all the words are interconnected, and there's this idea of semantic priming where when I say the word stick, your brain automatically primes with the words wood, leaves, branches, all of these other words because they're linked together. And so doing exercises like this, what the goal is to try and aim to create those links between the words. So to create the links between this word and this. Anyway, I realized that I just launched into a linguistic spiel, which is no good for anyone. So we're trying to learn language here, not linguistics. So good luck with this. I'd love to see your videos if you're brave enough to send them. And I hope everything's going well today. We'll see you. Good evening, everyone, and I apologize for the late video. My morning turned out to be rushed, so here it is. So to go over these ones, it's Wias askau, Nipi askau, Sita askaso, Pigo askaso, Sogao askaso, Siwihtagan askau. So the meat is raw, the leaves are raw, the spruce tree is raw, the spruce gum is raw, or the spruce pitch, the sugar is raw, and the salt is raw. And again, these demonstratives show what type of noun it is. The green ones are inanimate nouns, and the orange ones are animate nouns. And then we have the finals here that are determining what kind of noun it's going to take. So the final isse
due to the color you can see, links to any of these ones that end in oa. So sita askaso, pigo askaso, sogao askaso. Whereas a, and so the long a final is used for inanimate nouns. Wias askao, nipi askao, siwihtagan askao. Now I'm going to go on to the next lesson. We're going to use the same nouns, but instead of using the demonstratives to show what if they're like their animacy, I'll just highlight or surround them in the color. Okay, now we're going to use a different final. This one is ISW and ITE. And these finals mean to finish, to do something by heat, by the application of heat. So gis means to finish. We find that in words like nagisitan, I've finished it. And in this one, it's to finish by heat. So if we do wias gisiteo, the meat is cooked. Nipi gisiteo, the leaf is cooked. Sita gisiso, the spruce tree is cooked. Pigo gisiso, the pine pitch is cooked. Sogao gisiso, the sugar is cooked. Siwihtagan gisiteo, the salt is cooked. So again, the different finals here mean to be finished by heat, but it's a different final based on the animacy of the noun that it's describing. And remember, these are all third person, right? Like the meat is not me and the meat is not you. The meat is something else. So we use the W on the end. And tomorrow we're going to dive a little bit deeper into this. But for now, just realize that these two finals, they mean the same thing, but they relate to something different, right? So the ISO, or the ISW, if you will, relates to the animate nouns, and the ITE relates to inanimate nouns. Wias gisiteo, nipi gisiteo, sihta gisiso, pego gisiso, sogao gisiso, siwihtagan gisiteo. So if you practice that, and tomorrow morning, hopefully if I've got time, I'll delve a little deeper into it. Good night, everyone.
Good morning, everyone. This is going to be a bit of a quick video because I'm running a bit late. So I want to continue on from what we were talking about yesterday. So when we have an animate noun like sihta, we add iso to mean that it is finished by heat. Okay, so sihta gisiso. Gis is finished. Is is by heat, and the o is a reflexive. It means that only that person is involved in the action. Like michso, only you're eating. Whereas you'd have to say like nimoao to eat someone or something like that. You can't say namichson kia, like you can't say I eat you, because that doesn't make any sense. It's like I eat by myself and somehow I'm throwing you in that sense, and it doesn't make any sense at all. So what's important here is the is in this position means by heat. Okay? So if we take gisiso from yesterday and we take off the o, there is a possibility that the W is, it doesn't really matter. The W would blend into an O anyway, so it doesn't matter if we write it or not. But if we take off that O and we get gisis, we can add this W in or make sure that the W is there to reference that the heat being used is a third person. So you have finished by heat, the heat not being from me, and then we put in the theme sign to show the direction of what the action's doing and who's involved. So this is a normal VTA conjugation, which I know is new for some of you. Don't sweat that. We're going to go more into this when I'm not running late. But for now, let's just make a few examples. So gisisueo is she cooks him, let's say. And nagisisuao is I cook him or I cook her. And kigisisuao is you cook him or you cook her. So that kind of sounds weird when we say those sentences. But if we sub in like rabbit or something, so Bob gisisueo wapuswa. Oops, there should be another W in there. Bob gisisueo wapuswa. Bob cooks the rabbit. And there's an A on the end of wapus because it's marking that with this E, the direction is going from Bob onto the rabbit. There are other ways to do this, but this is one way, and this is called the obviative in linguistics. So Bob gisisueo wapuswa. Bob cooks the rabbit. Nagisiswa wapus. I cook him or her, which is the rabbit. So I cook the rabbit. Nagisiswa wapus. Kigisiswa wapus. You cook him or her, and him or her being the rabbit. So kigisiswa wapus. So yeah, that's where we can take a word that's reflexive, and it's a VAI technically,
and we can bring out the VTA of it. Or if we look at it a different way, we take off the O and we add different letters in here to like we take off the O and we put in different theme signs. Instead of being reflexive, it now becomes third to third obviative, it becomes first to third, blah 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 blah. So that's just kind of a sneak peek at what we're going to be doing. If that's overwhelming, please don't let it be. Just be okay with it not making sense right now, and we'll dive a little harder or a little farther into it someday when I'm not running so late. So have a great day, everybody. Miogi seganasik. Egwa achkamene mo tan. Danse kakyao kinawao. Yeah, another late post here. Once again, ran a little late this morning. So I want to continue on with geesis, the word we talked about yesterday. So we have this, what we call the initial. It's the initial part of a word. It's called an initial morpheme, and it means to finish, geese. And then if we look in these four words, we have is, which means by heat, and we have a t, which means by heat. And I'll explain that go into that a little bit more in a second. But we have four words here. Okay, quietness wawe is the egg is cooked. It's literally telling the state of the egg. Okay, quietness wapus is the rabbit is cooked or warm, but usually cooked. So again, it's telling the state of the rabbit. But then we have these other two, quietness wawe. And this literally means she or he cooks an egg. She finishes by heat an egg. And this one, gisisweo wapu swa, to make a slight correction there, gisisweo wapu swa, the W after the S, it means she or he cooks a rabbit, okay, finishes by heat a rabbit. Now if we look at these four words, there's kind of a difference between the last two and the first two. The first two describe more or less the state of an object, okay, how it's existing. But the second two, they describe an interaction of somebody with an object, okay? So gisiteo wawe, the egg is cooked. Gisiso wapus, the rabbit is cooked. These are both describing how that particular focus, that entity is existing, right? The rabbit is currently existing in a cooked state. The egg is currently existing in a cooked state. Whereas gisisum and gisisweo, they tell of an action between two entities, right? One entity has cooked an egg and the other entity has cooked a rabbit. And these are very important differences between the words. So what is the difference in what's going on here? So we can see the beginning is more or less the same. We notice that for some reason there's a T in the first one and S in the other one, and that's a little bit more involved. So let's actually leave that for now. For now, let's just compare those and consider them the same. They're all in green. But if we look after them, this is literally telling that somebody is doing it to something, like an inanimate thing, okay? This here afterwards. But then when we add in an animate object, when somebody's doing something to an animate object, we have to add this W in, and then we add in a direction marker, which is the E, and it tells which direction the action that's occurring between two animate things is which direction it's going, and we're going to dive into that probably tomorrow. And then just this A on the end of wapuswa is to denote which person that is in that interaction. So basically we have two states and we have two interactions, and that's a very important point with this. And then one last thing I want to point out here is when you talk about gisiteo wawe, an egg is cooked, you can't say, like an egg is inanimate. An egg can't be, like you couldn't change that to I am cooked, because you're not an egg, but you are in the same classification of a rabbit. So gisiso wapus, we can change that to negisisun, I am cooked, right? So since we are animate objects or animate nouns, we can speak about ourselves being in this state. And we can also speak about doing the interaction with an inanimate object, and we can also speak about doing an interaction with an animate object. So the last three here that I have in the curly brace, they can be changed to be expressed from the point of view of the speaker or the listener. And that's really important because it opens up the door to... So examples are always good because that probably didn't make too much sense. It's a little bit hard to explain. So I couldn't change gisiteo wawe somehow to mean like I am cooked an egg or something. It doesn't make any sense. But I could, if I was the rabbit, or if I take the rabbit out, I could say negisisun, I am cooked. I could say negisisein wawe, I cooked an egg, because I can do that action to an egg. And I could say nagisiswao wapus. We take off the nagisiswao wapus. I cook a rabbit. So I can have an interaction with either an inanimate thing or an animate thing, and I can, since I'm an animate thing, I can also describe my state. So the last three can be changed to be expressed from the point of view of me or you or us or you guys, like plural, you plural people. We can change those all, and we call that conjugation. We're going to get that into that in a bit, where we change the words to. We did a little bit of that back here, where we changed it to nagagitasin, kigagitasin, gagitaso, right? I am sore, you are sore, she or he is sore. And that's this type right here, nagisasun, kigisasun, gisaso. I am cooked, you are cooked, he or she is cooked. But then these other ones, they have slightly different ways they change, because we have to describe us and the objects that's being affected. And so these are going to conjugate slightly differently. And we're going to get that in another day, because I'm already on video number 5 today. But nobody took up my challenge from last lesson, so I'm kind of curious if everyone's still with me. If you don't mind, post a little video saying where you're at and if anything's giving you trouble.
Good morning, everyone. Yesterday, Marion asked, how would I say my brain is cooked? So in Cree, we have to understand this is 2 different concepts. One is my brain, and the second is it's being cooked. So we can divide those up like that. And the first one, my brain, we simply look up my brain in the dictionary and we come up with niatip or nihtip. Okay, and when we look those up, we notice beside it, it will say NDI, which is a noun that's dependent and inanimate. Okay, and since it's inanimate, we know we have to use the VII to describe it, which is this word up here, quietness. So, sorry, I wrote this niatipoma just as a way to remember that it's inanimate. But really, the phrase you're looking for is niatip quietness. My brain is cooked. Now, here's an interesting point. This is a colloquial expression in English. Colloquial, or it's more figurative. It's saying that your brain is tired, or it's all played out, or it's exhausted. Now, have to be really careful with that, because this literally means that your brain has had heat applied to it until it is finished. Which also has a funny connotation, but it is slightly different, right? So, niatip quietness. And just to give one example of how to look something up, if you go to bengod.com, we can type the word brain, and then choose English, and then choose search, and we're going to get 4 results. And those are our 4 results: niatip, nihtip, miatip, and metip. And the difference are, one has been declined, like changed to mean my brain, and the other one is just simply a brain, unpossessed. But if we go over here is the interesting part. They're all NDI, which means they're inanimate nouns that are dependent, meaning that they have to have something affixed to them. So in this case, niatip has the N at the beginning. That means my brain, niatip. You can't just say iatip. It doesn't make any sense. But you can say miatip, which means a brain that I'm not specifying who is the possessor of, if you will. So miatip is just a brain, or this unpossessed brain. Niatip is my brain. Quietness is your brain.
Yeah, today is going to be a short lesson. We're going to use the initial mōcik, which is like kind of fun or amusement. And we're going to add 4 different endings, 4 different finals. So mōcikiso, like we saw with our other isse words, describes an animate noun. So mōcikiso, the dog is fun. He's like a fun dude. Describes the state the dog's in. Mōcigan, this is describing the state of the judgmental state of an inanimate noun. So astotin, mōcigan, the hat is fun. It's a fun hat. Mōcikihtāl, we add this H, and then we have a VTA conjugation. So that's literally like she or he, somebody else that we've already talked about, is causing the dog to have fun. And mōcikihtāl, she or he, that person we were talking about, is having fun with the hat. Okay, so we have 4 different things here. We have two words that are describing the state of the object that they're linked to. So like mōcikisoatim, it's describing the state of the dog. Mōcikanastotin, it's describing the state of the hat. Now when we add the H in, the H is causing something else to be in this state. So mōcikihtāl, like Bill mōcikihtāl. Bill is causing the dog to have fun. Okay, so now it's an interaction between, say, Bill or whoever else and the dog. And then this one, a hat can't have fun. It doesn't have volition. So we add this T in, and now it takes an inanimate noun, and it means the person is having fun with the object. So Bill mōcikihtāl astotin. Bill is having fun with the hat. But it's describing the interaction between two animate nouns, or an animate noun and inanimate noun, whereas the first one is describing the state. Just to recap, two words that describe the state, just with the one final, mōcikiso atim, mōcigan astotin. Whereas if we want to describe the interaction between two different entities, an animate and inanimate, we can say mōcikihtāl atimwa, or Bill mōcikihtāl atimwa. Bill is causing the obviative atimwa to have fun. Or we can use an inanimate noun by adding a T to that same that same derivation, and we can get Bill mōcikihtāl astotin. So Bill is now having fun with the hat. Anyway, I just thought I'd show the four of the different derivations we can do, and we can dive deeper into this in the next lesson. Have a great day, everyone.
Notes. Today, good morning, everyone. Today, I want to just kind of put a pause on the examples and just kind of talk about why I learn this way. So this is just my way of learning. It's not the right way of learning. But why do I break everything up this way, and why is it important for me to do that? So first of all, we've been cutting things into initials, medials, and finals. And the question is, why bother doing that? Why not just memorize the word altogether? For me, the first thing is that my brain is not capable of remembering words that are 18,000 letters long and 4,700 syllables. So I tried for a long time, actually. At one point I had over 1,000 flashcards going in a spaced repetition system trying to memorize the dictionary, which is not an efficient way of learning the language, by the way. It's actually been proven, or it's an accepted school of thought that that's not efficient, and I can definitely vote for that. Context and phrasings will give you so much more in how to link the words in your brain, and also the context will help your brain know when to bring up those words through semantic priming, which is like your brain's way of linking concepts together, and then within the concept categories the words. That's again another school of thought that's accepted today. I'm going down on a tangent here, but anyway, so one of it is efficiency. If you learn a couple of medials and finals together, you can just keep changing the initials and you get words for free. And the initials are 1 or 2, maybe 3 syllables long at the most, but normally 1 or 2 syllables for the initials. And then on top of that, you can make little resources like this. So this is a little book that I laminated for a canoe trip, and it literally just has a whole bunch of initials, because there are only about 40, 50 finals. So there's probably not even that many. There's probably 25 or 30 medials, and so that's only say worst case scenario, that's only 70, or best case scenario, depending on how you view it, that's only 70 pieces that a person has to learn. And then after that, it's all just initials. So by making an initials book, I can take that into the steam room when I go to the Canada Game Center here, and I can practice telling myself stories and things while I'm sitting there. So that's one reason for learning this. And the other reason is, for me personally, as I started to learn more about the medials and finals, it made me realize how the language not forces but causes the speaker to evaluate what they're trying to say. For instance, if a person has to include a medial for wood inside of the word they're talking about, that changes the way in how I think about the concept that I'm trying to portray. So instead of saying I cut the tree down, I have to say I'm tree cutting down right now. Although that doesn't sound very different in English, and it's not that hard for us, the thought process to include the wood in the verb as opposed to an outside object, which is also an option, but the ability to do it, and also the it's almost more accepted, or it's more precise vocabulary if you do it that way in a lot of cases. It made me view
things maybe what I like to think of is a little closer to the actual lens of the language. So by breaking things down this way, it allowed me to kind of see the language through the language's eyes, for lack of a better term, or see it through its own lens. So that's actually the main reason I learned this way. The first reason is actually just an added bonus. But I just wanted to pass it on for today. Pass that on today is for something to think about if you're having trouble or if you're enjoying this method. For instance, there are two ways to make a VII verb, or to describe an inanimate noun with a verb. There are two different endings that are often used, short AN and long AW. And if we read into like Denny, who is a linguist from the 80s and 90s, he supposes that these are to do with things that are based on a judgment and things that are based on a spatial judgment. Now that may or may not be right, or may not be completely correct, but it might be a starting point of where we can kind of define what the difference is between the two. And certain initials will take both, but what I've noticed is when they're in context with when they were said, there is a tendency for more of a judgment or more of a spatial judgment. And again, that's just another one of these things where when I'm talking about if something's fun, it's like, well, that's a judgment, or is that a spatial judgment? Well, there's nothing spatial about it, so it has to be a judgment. Or to continue that thought, if we use something like misao, which means it is big, like misao astotin, it is a big hat. The hat being big is spatially big. It's not a judgment. Like weight, for instance, would be gosekwan. That's a short an, because whether something is heavy or not is a judgment based on the speaker, right? I might find it heavy, you might find it light because you might be stronger than me. Whereas something, whether it's big or not, that's based on spatial, like it's spatial, how much spatial, what am I trying to say? How much space it takes up in the world. And so something being big, you wouldn't say misun, you'd say misao, because it's spatially judged. Again, something heavy or light would be judgment based from the perspective of the speaker. So learning that and then learning these pieces has really been interesting to me to kind of delve a level deeper into what the words mean. And then from there, I can just tack on different initials once I really... Good morning, everyone. Today I'm going to continue talking about initials and medials and finals. And I want to show kind of how things break down. So let's take an initial and add a bunch of different finals. And these are the finals I'm saying there's about 40 or 50 of them. And once we learn them all, then we just have to learn the yellow part. So I'm just going to try and demonstrate that here. So we have the initial tug. And that means to arrive, or to, come to a place. And so we have tagohao, which means to arrive by flying. Tagoteo, arrive by walking. Tagoneo, this is to arrive by using your hand. So the hand is what's causing the thing to arrive. So in other words, to add. So tagoneo is to add someone to something, and tagonum, with the same N but a different ending, is to add something inanimate to something. But again, the N is describing what is being used to accomplish the initial in front of it. While mo is to escape or flee, so that's to arrive from fleeing. Taguaso is to arrive by wind, by blowing. Taguastao, astao is to put something. So taguastao is to basically add something or mix something in, or arrive something by putting it there. And taguagochin is to arrive. It kind of depends on your region. It could be arrived by driving, or it could also be arrived by floating. Agoche is to float, or in some areas it is to drive in a vehicle. So we can see there that these finals change the meaning quite a lot, but the arriving part is the same. And I just want to point out, these are tago and these are tug. And the only difference is these finals start with a consonant, whereas these ones start with a vowel. So the actual form is tug with a W. But when we have a final that starts with a consonant, we add an I, and a W and an I together over a morpheme boundary become an O. So that's why these are tuggo. So you're probably thinking, this is all well and fine, but how do I know how to cut the words up? And honestly, the only way I've done this over the years is to find other words that have similar pieces. So, an example for each one here, tagohao. Oh, just a side note, how is actually YHA originally in Y dialect, although the Y's been dropped, but that's why you'll see like pimidao, tagodao in TH dialect. So there is a TH there, it's just been dropped, or sorry, there's a YH cluster there, but it's been dropped to an H in recent times. So tagohao, pimihao,
we can compare these and realize that they're both to do with flying, and so we can figure out what the initials are from that. So tago hao, arrive by flying, pimi hao, to fly along, tago teo, to arrive by walking, pimo teo, to walk along, tago neo, to arrive something by using your hand, gawa neo, gawe is like downwards, falling, tago neo is to add someone to something, gawa neo is to knock someone down with your hand, tago nam is to add something inanimate, or to arrive something inanimate by hand, and gawa nam is to bring down or knock down with your hand something inanimate. Taguamo is to arrive by fleeing. Giweamo, that Y is in brackets just because the initial is giwe, but giwe ends in an E, and the E would eat the A if they were together. So in some places in the language, there's a glide added in so that we keep both of these sounds, so we can tell that it's amo instead of giwemo, which wouldn't sound quite right. This, by the way, this Y that's added in as a glide is almost always dialectal, so that's probably giwedamo, although I'm not certain on that. So taguamo, to arrive by fleeing, giweamo, to flee home, because this is the like nigiwan, I go home, so home fleeing, so to flee home. Taguaso is to arrive by wind. Gawaso is to break down by wind or fall down by wind. Gawe is that downward one that we saw up here. Taguastao is to add something in or arrive something by, like to put something by arriving it. Achitastao, achit is upside down, or if you think of bending over, like, yeah, upside down is probably the easiest way. So achitastao is to be put upside down. Taguagochin, either arrive by vehicle or to arrive by floating. And achitagochin is to either, upside down driving, which doesn't really make sense, or achitagochin would be like floating upside down. So this is really good. The one thing to keep in mind here is if we take the American form catsup for ketchup, it has nothing to do with cat, all right? Catch and cat have nothing in common. Cat and catty do have something in common. To be catty is literally using the word cat and adding in the appropriate ending to make it a descriptive in English, so those two are the same. Cat and category have nothing in common. What I want to point out here is just because you find a sequence of letters that are the same doesn't mean that it's actually a morpheme, and this takes a little bit of practice and trial and error, but the best way I can recommend is to look at the definitions and see if the piece that you think, for instance, let's say we're using ha, and we know it means flying, to make sure flying is in both definitions in the dictionary. That's a pretty good chance that they both mean flying, and they should be in similar positions in the word. So you should see ha in the final position or close to the final position. Otherwise, if you saw it like in an initial or like in the early part of the word, it might be something else. So anyway, that was kind of a long lesson, but I hope that's kind of fun to, maybe you guys can practice that. I'd love to hear if you guys want to share practicing it, or if you want to share some words too.
Good evening, everyone. Today we're going to deal with something completely different. On request for something Halloweenish, in a pinch, I've come up to deal with the word ghost, the initial ghost, which means fear. And I want to talk about a few different forms we can have. So ghostum is VTI, meaning that we use it to fear something that's inanimate. So we would conjugate that to nigostain, I fear it. And an example of that would be oskana, bones. So nigostain oskana, I fear bones. Now if we're talking about something animate like chipai, a ghost, we would change it to nigostao chipai. Nigostao chipai. And the form you'd find in the dictionary for that is ghosteo. So that would change, ghosteo would change to nigostao for me. So ghosteo is she or he fears the other person. Nigostao is I fear that other person. So nigostao chipai, I fear ghost. Or nigostao megi ekosise papit. Nigostao Maggie ekosise papit. I'm afraid of Maggie when she is laughing like this, when she's all like muhahaha. Anyway, gostachio is just to be afraid in general, to be afraid. So negostachin is I'm afraid, but nothing specifically, just afraid. Now this is an interesting word that I'm just going to dive a little bit deeper into just for fun. Just bear with me. If this doesn't make sense, don't dwell on it. We'll go back to kind of take a few steps back later, but I'm just going down a rabbit hole today. So gostachi my likely guess for that is it's actually ghost at and e. Okay, at as in pimatiso, at being like kind of life, breath, that sort of idea. And the long I is interesting. A long I final often means to achieve a state that you weren't in originally. Okay, we can see that in mōcikihtāl or seisawi. Mōcikihtāl is to be strong, but the idea is that you weren't strong originally and you achieve that state. If we go off what Denny says back in some of his research, or seisawi, to exercise, you've achieved this state of physical exertion that you weren't doing previously. To follow up on that, I looked for other words that have at in them, and we come up with gostatetam. Okay, and this is to be afraid mentally of something, to fear something, but more involved in your head of fearing it. And once again, we see this at in here, and I would imagine that is the same at as here. And so the way we would go about to try and figure this out would be to make forms that we don't have in the dictionary that mirror other forms. So pimatiso, we know that is she or he lives, so nipimatisin. So I should be able to say negostatisin. Okay? So if I had a speaker on hand, I might try that out, like, oh, tapoy negostatisin. Just a warning, if you are going to try and elicit examples from a speaker, there's a couple things to remember. One, negative results aren't informative. So if they say, no, that doesn't work, that actually doesn't mean it doesn't work. It might mean that the context is wrong. It might mean that you didn't say it properly. It might be the stress patterns in the wrong place. It might be that that speaker just doesn't know that word. So don't be discouraged if they say no. Just, politely thank them. But if they say, yes, it does make sense, that actually is informative, because if one person can understand it, then the logic is correct with it. The other thing is, when eliciting or trying to make sense, when trying to see if something exists as a word, don't just go up to a speaker and be like, hey, can I say negostatisin? And they'll be like, well, you can say whatever you want. What we want to do is try and work it into our natural speech. So we want to bring in, we want to prime this word a couple times, like, oh yeah, tagosik nigostain, atipiskak, neoskaheganik. I was afraid as it was dark in my house. Nigostao atim emigisimut. I was afraid of the dog that was barking. Ekosise ete gostatisian. So I've used this word here in the conjunct form. And so like this, I was living in fear. And if the speaker was like, oh, they didn't say anything, or oh yeah, they might agree, then that ball has gone over the net, so to speak, and it's not like, it's a point, it's a win. And then I might try it later on in the conversation to say it again, to see if it trips up in a different context. And that's one way to test new forms, but it's also another way to work backwards and break down forms that we already have in the dictionary to what the actual components are, and to understand them better. Anyway, hope this helps. Feel free to try some Halloween vocabulary on a video. That'd be awesome.
So, good morning, everyone. This is the lesson from last night that I forgot to send. Wrote it all out and forgot to send it. So today we're going to look at the initial asut. Okay, and this initial means to promise something. So we can promise something, and if we're promising something, it's something inanimate. And so the form would be asutam, and that would change if I wanted to say I am promising something, it would change to netasotein. And I just highlighted these both in green to show you that am changes into en in the conjugation. So that's the part that's saying you're promising something, and that something is whatever follows. It could be a verb phrase, it could be a specific noun. If you could promise some kind of noun like netasutein, I don't know, miwe tamuan, I promise happiness, or something like that. In this case, I said netasutein egostachian. Okay, I promise that I will be scared. I promise it as I am scared. I'm currently scared at the time that I'm promising it. So this isn't translating onto here. If I was to put a ka here, netasutein kakostachian, I promise that I'll be scared. Now, I wanted to talk, this is getting a little bit in depth, but I just wanted to expose these ideas. If you don't understand this, that's fine. I'm going to go into it more and more and more. But we have this little piece, and that tells us that whatever the initial is translating onto an inanimate object or a verb phrase.
But after that, we can actually add in a second person again with ao. So we can say asutamao, asutamo, asutamao, depending on your dialect. So we get these three morphemes. And from there, we conjugate like a VTA, which we'll go into again soon. And so I can say nitasutamoao. I promise it to him or her. Okay? And so it's the that's allowing the second person into the verb, and it's the a afterwards that's telling which direction the action is going, and it's the beginning and end bits that are telling you who's involved. So in this case, I'm involved, the third person's involved. It is going in the direction from me to the third person, and the ao allows me to add the third person in. So we get nitasutamoao, and then I can add in another verb phrase after that. Kago stuck chipaesi hoche. So I promise it to him or her that I will be scared. A ghost, this if they dress. So if they dress like a ghost, I promise I'll be scared. Nitasutamoao kago stuck chipaesi hoche. And then I just wanted to add one more piece here, is so, and that takes the direction and it puts it back onto the person where it originates from. So so if we have asutam to promise it, and you add an ao, so I promise it to someone, and then this brings it back to me. So instead of me promising it to someone, I promise it to someone, but that someone is myself. So asutamoao is so, but that actually contracts because we have an AW and an I at a boundary between the words. So it becomes asutamaso. So we conjugate that like michso, nitasutamasun. Okay, I promise it to myself. Nitasutamasun ega ewigo stuck megi chipai isihoche. I promise myself, and this is a negative, I will not be scared of her, Maggie, a ghost, if she dresses this way. Nitasutamasun ega ewigo stuck Maggie chipai isihoche. I promise myself I won't be scared of Maggie if she dresses like a ghost. I know that's a lot to take in. That's just an exposure, so don't try and memorize this. Just let yourself be exposed to it, and then we're going to dive into each part in a little bit more depth. But if we can grasp these little pieces and what they do, again, these are the finals, and this is arguably a final, So these derivational finals, if we can understand what they do, even though they're kind of abstract, if we can understand them, then we can get a lot more vocabulary for the price of basically nothing, because we just have to learn the initials from that point on. So I'm just trying to give you the ballpark thing. I know this is a lot at once, so don't feel overwhelmed, and feel free to hit us up with some of your Halloween phrases if you do so feel inclined. Have a great day.
Hey everyone, here with a quick lesson for today. Today I'm going to show you the difference between a VAI and a VII. And for those of you who don't want to learn all that jargon, let's go about it the more organic way. So we have two types of nouns in Cree. All right, we can call them inanimate and animate. We can call them oma and awa words. We can call them whatever we want, as long as we understand that there's a division between the two. So if we say agop and we wanted to say this is a blanket, we would say agop oma. Okay, so it's in this box. Whereas if we're talking about astis, we would put awa after it and we'd say astisawa. This is a mitt. Okay, so just for the record, a gop is a blanket, chiman is a canoe, astis is a mitten or a glove, and a tos is an arrow. Okay, and I picked these purposely because they don't really lend themselves to the animate, inanimate, whatever. Like, why is a blanket inanimate but a glove isn't, right? The whole point is we don't care. We just care what box they go into. So they're either in the green or in the orange. Now knowing which box they're in allows us to link concepts with them. So we have four concepts here. We have ayagask, which is to be like wide or broad, papak, which is to be thin, pim, which is to be twisted, and guayesk, notice there's a W at the end, which is to be straight, okay? A lot of people will say like guayesk, as in like that's correct or that's right, and it literally comes from the word like that's straight, that's not bent or whatever. Anyway, so again, these are initials, but to link the concept of this initial to this noun, to this entity, to link this descriptor to this entity, we have to add in this ending. So this is kind of somewhat of a root view of what we did before. But the point here is that we can pick one or the other. So we can work both ways. So if I wanted to say, okay, I want to describe something that's wide, and be like, well,
what am I describing becomes the question, and you have to figure out what box it goes into. So I want to describe that this myth is wide. So we're like, okay, we're in this box. So we take a ayagas, and we get ayagaskiso. Ayagaskiso astis. So this is pretty easy, right? But all of a sudden you want to describe, we want to describe a blanket. Well, we're in this box now. So instead of adding isse and w, we add long aw. We get ayagaskao agop. Right? So the piece that links the concept within the verb, like these are all written as one word. This would be ayagaskao, like there'd be no space here. But the piece that links the concept is the final. And the initial is the piece that tells you what the actual idea is. So let's go through these really quickly. Ayagaskao agop, ayagaskao chiman, ayagaskiso astis, ayagaskiso atos. Okay, that's pretty easy. So the blanket's wide, the canoe's wide, the glove is wide, and the arrowhead is wide. Papagao agop, papagao chiman, papagiso astis, papagiso atos. Pimao agop, pimao chiman, pimiso astis, pimiso atos. Now notice the W on the end here. This is important because when this W mixes with this I, we're going to get an O. So instead of saying goyasquiso, we're going to say goyascoso. That's the only change here, and that's anytime you have a consonant and a W at the end, or at where two morphemes meet. So to run through this one, goyasquao agop, goyasquao chiman, goyascoso astis, goyascoso atos. So we can make a little chart here, but and by doing that, we see that there's 4 things we're learning, and then we're learning to add them different ways. If I was to write out the full words, this would now become 8, right? And then, so by doing it this way, we can train our brain to start noticing that we have to understand what we're talking about before we can use the word to talk about it. Anyway, I hope that helps. I've set up lots of charts like these, and a person can just sit there and quiz themselves with anything. You can use anything in the room, you know, like, okay, masnahigan. Okay, well, I know that's masnahigan oma. So once I know that, now I can say ayagaskao masnahigan, papagawas masnahigan, pimao masnahigan, quaesquao masnahigan. So yeah, that can be a useful tip, or I have found value in that technique. And let me know, share your thoughts if you're finding this useful. I'll keep going. If not, we can go a different route. Lots of different ways to study. Anyway, hope all is well and have a great day.
Everybody. Good morning, everybody. Today we're going to do just more of the same. I'm going to use the same nouns, and we're going to use the same boxes, but we're just going to use 3 new initials. The whole point here is I want to show you one phonetic change that happens, or phonetic reality that happens, and I also just want to show you that you can just keep adding initials to this list. So once again, we have nouns that take oma and nouns that take awa, or otherwise known as inanimate nouns and animate nouns, and they determine the ending of these words. So wag is to be bent, miawe is to be hairy, and wase is to be shiny or bright. Okay, so just like last time, just like ayagaskao agop, we would say wagao agop, so the blanket is bent or curved. Miawe, now this is interesting, the initial ends in a vowel, it ends in an E. And therefore, before we add a vowel to an E, we add in what we call a glide or a semivowel. And this is just because if we added the E directly to the I, it would eat the I, and you'd get miawe so. Or you'd get miaweo, and that wouldn't sound right. You need the Y in there, so you hear miawe, yao. So that's going to happen anytime that the actual initial ends in an E. So miawe yao, agop, the blanket is hairy, or miawe iso, astis, the mitt is hairy. Wase yao, agop, wase yao iso, sorry, wase iso, astis, the mitt is shiny. So wagao agop, wagaso astis, wagao chiman, wagaso atos. Miawe yao agop, miawe iso astis, miawe yao chiman, miawe iso atos. Wase yao agop, wase iso astis, wase yao chiman, wase iso atos. Perfect. So there's 3 more words. If anyone's brave enough, please post a video of you talking about hairy mitts or shiny blankets. Sounds good. Have a great day. I hope everyone's phone is on silent while they're sleeping, because this one's coming at you early morning. I'm back on the early morning shift, so the old 3:30 in the morning Cree lesson. Yeah, so let's jump right into it. So we know if we take ayagask, we can get ayagaskau and ayagaskiso. That's what we did last time, and we know from the colors here, ayagask is the initial, which means the part that means wide, and the final a selects for an inanimate object. It means it's describing something inanimate or something of that category. So if we look back, that's what's going on here. Ayagask ow. But it's the a, right? So, and then the W is the part that tells us if it's a third person or some other kind of person, like a fourth person, or otherwise known as a third person oviative, which we'll get into later. So the W is telling us that it's, it's a pen, it's not me, it's not you. Okay, so this is all fun and games, and this is what we've done so far. And I want to show, this is actually a certain kind of conjugation. So the green here, conjugating it with a W, let's use ayagaskiso instead, right? So ayagaskiso is she or he is wide. But I can actually say netayagaskisin, which means I am wide, or I am broad, or I am, So I can change that to mean me, whereas the W means she or he or that person, that one. So that's the 3S, the third person singular form. Whereas if I said netayagaskisin, that's a first person singular form. That means me. Kitayagaskisin, you. So we did some of that a while back when we had gagitase. We said negagitasin, kegagitasin, gagitaso. That is all what we call the independent mode in Algonquian linguistics, okay? This is something that we have in English, but we don't express with inflection, so it's sort of a little bit tricky to understand. Let's just dive into it. If I was to make a statement, like I'm holding something and I said, ayagaskau, this is wide. That's a statement. It's independent. It's on its own. So I would probably use the independent mode. If I want to say a quality in conjunction with something else, if I wanted to say this is wide and bent for some reason, I wouldn't say ayagaskau and then say wagao. Those are both independent clauses. And this is a little bit, it's a little bit more advanced, but don't just hang in there with me. If you don't understand, that's fine, because we will continuously breach this topic over and over again. But if I wanted to say this is wide, or if I wanted to say this is bent and it's wide at the same time of it's being bent, I would say, for instance, wagao, and then I would throw the wide part, what I would call a conjunct. So I would say ayagaskag, okay? So all we've done is we look at the green, we've added an E to the front, and the W is changed into a K. That's it. Or, in this case, we've added an E to the front, and the W is turned into a T. And what that conjugation change does is tell us that this is happening at the same time as this, if that makes sense. There's a few different ways to use the conjunct. We're just going to we're hitting in that 80% of the time rule here. So I don't want to get caught up in the reeds of, sometimes it can be used in different ways. But conjunction, con from means with. It's I think it's Latin, and junct, like a junction, like joining. So with joining, so it literally means the mode that joins with another mode. Okay, why are we doing this, Ben? Why are you making everything so hard? Well, let's just go through these really quick. So ayagaskau changes into ayagaskag. Ayagaskiso changes into ayagaskasit. Papakau changes into apapagak. Papakiso changes into apapakisit. Okay? So we can see those changes are pretty simple. W goes to a K, we add an E to the front. We add an E to the front, W goes to T. Now, why are we doing this? Well, before I explain that, I'm going to explain two more words. If we're talking about something animate, like a glove, a stis, that's a stisawa, right? And if I wanted to say, bring me that mitt, I would say, peso a stis. Now, this is an imperative form. We haven't gone into those yet, but just bear with me. You always have to teach one level past what you know, so just hang in there with me. So peso, bring it, the animate thing. So peso a stis. But if I wanted to say, you know, masnega negin, or masnega natik, this pencil, and I was in a region where that's inanimate, I would say peita. Peita. Okay. So we have pesoa, peitaoma. Now, just as a side note, these are like the word this in English. Bring this, bring this. Well, we can also say bring that. And the difference between awa and ana is the distance from the speaker. So masnega natik oma, but if it's farther away, masnega natik anima. So we can see this is a distance thing. I'm just showing you both because I'll accidentally say the wrong one here half the time. So peso, bring animate one thing close to me, animate one thing farther away from me. Peita, bring towards me this inanimate thing close to me or this inanimate thing farther away from me, right? Bring this versus bring that. Now, why are we doing this? Well, we can link these concepts together. So we can say pesoastis eayagaskesit. Okay? So pesoastis, bring that mit to me, eayagaskesit. So I'm describing the mit here, but I'm describing the mit in relation to the rest of the phrase. So I don't use the independent here because it would be an independent statement. Like it'd be like saying pesoastis, period, next paragraph, something is wide. It's too much of a break. So I would use the conjunct here saying, you know, the mit that's currently being wide, bring that one. Pesoastis eayagaskesit. Or peitagop eayagaskak. So what are all these arrows? Well, these arrows, this is an animate thing, and so this ISI is selecting for an animate thing, and the only animate thing in this phrase is astis. So this is describing astis. And peso, I'm not that familiar with this ending, but this is selecting for astis. Whereas in peita, the long A is selecting for an inanimate object, and this long A is selecting for an inanimate object. So we get peitagop eayagaskag. Bring to me the inanimate blanket that is currently being wide. I mean, that's a really bad translation, but you can understand kind of where the pieces are working together there. Peitagop eayagaskag. What that means is bring me the wide blanket. But literally, if you wanted to kind of break it down even more, the blanket that's currently wide, bring that one to me. Anyway, that's quite a bit for today. I know that's a bit of a long lesson. There's about 40 videos here. So, yeah, great job, Maggie. Kitagahkihtasun. Kitagahkihtagusin. Akamenemo. And anyone else who's brave enough, feel free to post videos of you practicing these. And let me know if there's any particular things you want to cover in these. I'm going to do kind of a review today. So I've highlighted these in a different way this time. So anything in green has to line up with green, and anything in orange has to remain in orange, but the yellow can go to either, okay? And what I'm trying to show here is what's based on, we'll call animacy, or what we have to be specific for. So first we actually need to know what we're talking about. So if we're talking about an agope, it's here in the green. That means we have to stay in the green. If we're talking about a stis, a mit, or mitas, pair of pants, or atos, it's in the orange, so we have to stay in the orange, except for when there's no choice, then we can pick the yellow. And if we look at it like this, we can kind of see how everything jives together. So just to go over these quickly, agope is a blanket, chiman is a canoe, sewe pichigan or sewe pichigan is a phone or a thing that rings, a stis is a mit, atos is an arrowhead, and mitas is a pair of pants. So let's say I want to talk about a blanket. And I want to talk about the blanket being twisted, so that's pim. So I've got a gope and pim. Then I just have to stay in the same color. So peita agope e pim ak. Peita agope e pim ak. Oh, you may guess some more chicken. About that. The neighbors fired up a quad, and my one dog decided she needed to sing a song to him. So anyway, so if we pick a noun, that'll tell us what color we have to stay in, and then we can just choose what we want to say about the noun by picking what's in the yellow. So we're going to talk about astis, a glove. So we're in the orange. So peso astis, bring me the mit. A wagasit, that is bent. Bring me the bent mit. because wag is bent. And we have to stay in the orange because the orange describes an orange noun. So the isse and the t work together to describe something that's in the orange. So let's run through a few examples, and you can mix and match here. So, peita se pichigan e ayaga skag. Peita agop e pimag. Peita chiman e papagag. Peso astis e waseisit. Bring me the glove that is glowing. Peso atos e wagasit. Peso metas e miawe. To highlight that last one, that's going to be a high frequency phrase. Bring me the pants that are hairy. In other words, bring me the hairy pants. Very useful phrase. Yeah, high frequency for sure. So peso metas e miawesit. So if anyone's brave enough, feel free to grab this chart and or write it out yourself or whatever works, and make a video making some of these phrases together. What I'd like to do is eventually, what I call these are frameworks. They tell you how to go through, and then you just start swapping in different initials, or you swap in different nouns, or you swap in different verbs, and that way you're only changing one piece at a time. And for my brain, little changes are easier to swallow than huge changes. So that's how I do it. If you got a different way, feel free to share as well.
Today we're going to talk about particles. Okay, particles are words that we can't change to link to a person. So a verb, I can say I'm running, or I can say you're running, or I can say he or she is running, and I change the verb to let you know who I'm talking about. And nouns, I can change them to be my gloves, or your gloves, or somebody else's gloves. So I change the word again to link it to an entity, right? To give possession to a noun or something like that. Particles can't be changed, but they have some interesting things with them. So today we're going to talk about the particle for the word in English where, like where is it? And we actually have two different wheres in Cree. We have one when we're dealing with inanimate nouns that use oma. So like agop oma, tante agop. So you'd use tante. And tante is two morphemes. It breaks down into tan and ite. Ite is like a place, like ite kawigian, the place that I live. Ite kawigian. Tanite is like question place, like it's kind of like unknown. I'm questioning about this place. That's kind of how that breaks down. So we have tante oma, and then if we're talking about like a stis, a glove, a stisawa, we would say tanawa. I kind of wrote it messy there, but it's T-A-N-I-W-A, and both A's are long. And here again we have the tan for like the questioning, not sure where it is, where part, and then awa. Now for some reason it's iwa, but it's the same thing as tanawa, like where is that one? So this is what place, this thing, where that one, if that makes sense. Just gets a little abstract when you try and break it up like that, but basically we have two different particles here, and we use them depending on what animacy or which group the noun we're talking about belongs to. So let's throw these into some sentences. So using the same sort of chart from last week, we need to pick a noun and then decide what color it's in. So let's pick a gulp. It's in the green. So we have to stay in green, except for when there's nothing green, then we can go into yellow. So tante a gulp e ayagaskak. Tante a gulp e ayagaskak. Tante a gulp e papagag. Tante se wipchigan e pimag. Where's the twisted phone? Whereas if we pick something like a stis, which is an animate noun, a stis awa, we're going to use tanawa. So tanawa a stis a pimisit. Where's the twisted glove? Tanawa a stis a papakisit. Where's the thin glove? And so we can write it down. If we write them out, they look like this. Tante agop e papagag. Tante chiman e wagag. Tanawa astis e miawe esit. Tanawa, that should be long. Tanawa mitas e ayagaskisit. Where are the pants that are wide or broad? So we can see very easily we can reuse this phrase by just changing one piece, because we already kind of know this from yesterday, so it's pretty simple, and then we just add in this one other choice. And so for me, when I'm going to speak, sometimes if I'm not sure what to say, I think about what I'm talking about. So like I'm going to talk about this masnaiganis, this small book. Okay, what is that? Well, that's green. So I'd say tante masnaiganis e papagag. Or I'd say peita masnaiganis e papagag. Bring me the thin book, or where is the thin book? So once we practice these charts, we can kind of just sub in different pieces. And also when we're reading, our brains can link, oh, I know this part. And then, like if we do enough of these, I know this part, and then we see a new word, oh, I can put that word there. So it kind of gives us an ability to self-study a bit in there. Yeah. Let's do a conversation, kind of put it all together. So here we have sewipichigan, a phone. And since it's a green, we're going to use tante, just like we did here. Tante oma, sewipichigan oma. So tante sewipichigan. Tante sewipichigan. So A, B, these are different people, right? Tante sewipichigan. Kigo sewipichigan. Sewipichigan e papagag. Ne te. Peitanama. Na. Okay, so where is the phone? Which phone? A phone that is thin. Over there. Bring it. Bring that thing. Here. So na is kind of like, nah, take it. Okay, what I want to show in this is look how much of it is coded based on what we're talking about, the noun we're talking about. Since the noun is inanimate or green or whatever you want to call it, we have to pick all these other endings and pieces to relate to that. Okay, second example, this time we're going to use an animate noun, astis, which is a mit. So tano astis, where is that one, the mit? Kigo astis, which mit? E miaoi is sit. The one that's hairy, or sorry, a one that is hairy. Neite, over there. Bring that one. Pesuana. Na, here. So here we can see, once again, actually I didn't quite highlight this right, the pe shouldn't be highlighted, but that ending plus ana, all of that is coded for animacy, which is based on the noun that we're talking about. So we need to know what we're talking about before we start to talk about it. And notice here, I just simply said one that's hairy, but I just basically said it's being hairy. I didn't put like ana or ewako or anything. You can do that just because this is relating to the question, so it's kind of in conjunction with it, hence the conjunct marker. Okay, so run through that one more time. Tante sewipichigan. Kigo sewipichigan. Sewipichigan e papagag. Nite. Peitanama. No. And tano astis. Kigo astis. E miaoi sit. Nite. Pesuana. Nah. Well, that's my attempted voices when I'm this tired. If anyone else is still around, still watching these, feel free to post a video of you trying out. You can switch up the noun if you want, or switch up this part, because we know how to do that from these exercises. You know, sewipichigan e wagak, the bent phone, or however you want to change them up, but it'd be cool to see some of you practicing. Anyway, hope you have a great night, and we'll talk to you again.
Another Cree video coming at you at 3 in the morning. We'll call it Cree at 3. So today I'm just going to do another conversation piece using many of the same words. So we've got peita animagop, bring that one there, the blanket. E papagakchi, again these are two different people. E papagak, we know that is to be thin. And if we put chi after it becomes a question. And notice we use the conjunct here because it's relating back to the previous statement. So, peita anima agop, e papagagchi. Moats anima e pimak. So, moats is like nemoya so squatch, not even, not, no. That one. And then again, this is in relation to this, e pimag. This is to be twisted. So, no, the twisted one. Nah, take this one. And then when we fast forward, and the same person's like, na, otnaoma. Otna means to take. Kigoyanama. Ewago agop kapapagag. Okay, there's a couple things I want to point out here. Ewago. That means like the one that I've previously mentioned, or the one we were talking about. In English, we would just say that one, that blanket that is thin. But what is that blanket? Well, it's referring back to the blanket we were talking about before. So that's ewago. Whereas anima is that blanket, kind of like pointing out a new blanket, like that blanket there, not that other blanket, that one there. This is like that previous blanket that we were talking about. So there's this conversation, and then you fast forward in time, and there's this one, so we can use ewako. And notice we use ka with a long A here, not A. We say ewako agop kapapagag. We don't say ewago agop epapagag. Although you could, it would mean something different. In this case, since I used ewago, I know that you know what blanket I'm talking about, and so in that case I would use ka, because I know
that the listener knows what I'm talking about. This is one of the uses of ka. It's similar to in English, the difference between me saying bring a cup and bring the cup. In English, if I say bring the cup, when I say that to you, I, in my head, believe that you know what cup I'm talking about. Whereas if I say bring a cup, I'm just saying bring any cup, doesn't matter. So that there's a definiteness is what it's called in linguistics, or you've probably heard the definite article versus the indefinite article. So a is an indefinite article, and the is a definite article because it's definite in what it refers to, and that's how I remember it anyway. Same thing here with ka. Now ka is used in a couple different ways in Cree. So this is only one of the ways. I want to warn you about that because I don't want you to read a book and be like, Ben, this isn't true. Ah! But anyway, and then let's do the conversation here that is in dealing with animate noun. So peso and metas. Notice that metas, pants, are singular in Cree. Peso and metas. Epim sitsi. Moats ana emiawe sit. Na. Na otnawa. Awinana. Ewago metas kamiawe sit. Okay, so if we look quickly at this, peso instead of peta, ana instead of anima, and then we have isit instead of ak, and again we have chi making that a question. Notice that otin and otina. Okay, otina has the same long a as peta, but when we go into the animate, when the word has an n as an instrumental, meaning hand, this means take with your hand, it doesn't have anything after the n in the imperative form. So that's how you can tell the two apart. And with animate nouns, you can use awina or kigwai, depending. I've heard both and I've seen both used in a book, so that's good. And ewago metas kamiyawe is sit. Again, we've got ewago, meaning those pair of pants that we were previously talking about. So like the pants. Bring me the pants that we were talking about, not any pair of pants. The specific pants, if you will. So we can look really quickly just from a distance and we can realize animacy, or the type of noun that we're talking about, really defines quite a bit in the sentence, because these are pretty much the same, right? Pay, but then we have ta, and we have TIW, but the T changes to an S, so we've got so. So we have, and then we have a different demonstrative pronoun and obviously a different noun. We've got different endings on the verb that tell us, and this is important because if I had a sentence that had a gulp and metas in it, depending on how I conjugate it, we can tell which one I'm talking about. And again, we have the demonstrative pronoun, we have the endings on this verb, we have the ending on that verb, demonstrative. To some degree, we have a different question particle here. We can use awina, which means kind of like who, and again, the noun and the end. So just at a glance, we can see that they're quite different, but at the same time, not that different. And someday we will go into the difference between ana and anima, and why these particles may be built off each other, one just having an addition that the other one doesn't have. But maybe I'll save that sneak peek for tomorrow, or I don't know, Saturday, or whenever we get to it. Anyway, hope everybody has a great day. Feel free to try out the conversation and make a video if you're excited enough to do that. And yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Today's going to be a really quick lesson. I'm on the road, but we're going to switch it up and do something different today. Today I wanted to just go over conjugating verbs in general. Now, in Cree, they're often taught like, oh, this is an inanimate intransitive verb, this is an inanimate transitive verb, and blah, 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 blah. And that is one way to look at it, and it is a very good way to look at it when you're looking at the conjugation phrasally, or when you're trying to figure out how to fit it in a sentence. Knowing what type of verb it is can help you choose what type of verb to use. But there are other ways of looking at it that are often not taught, or perhaps not touched on as much. And so, first of all, I just want to go over a few things here. These first two are two different words. They're the same word, but this one's conjugated for third person. And these two are not spelt to SRO standards. Okay? Why am I showing you this? Well, the way these all sound the same. Micho, micho, mitso, mitso. And so some people argue, well, we can just write it however. But the issue is, if you want to conjugate it and be able to check it, you need to write it with SRO. And so this is the one we want to use. This is the root form of the verb. If you write it like this means she or he eats. If you write it like this, it means eat, as in like a command. But when you have the command form, or the base form of the verb, then you can build all the stems off. So we see this ends in an O. So an O is a vowel. So we have to wrap it on both sides with an N, and that means that I would eat. So if we go down here, micho, we literally put it in here. ne mich sun. That's as easy as it is. Since it ends in an O, you just put an N on both sides. Jumping over here, again, 3 misspellings, but they end in an H, and that would totally change how we would conjugate them. That's why we write it this way, nehioe. Now, E is the one vowel, if a verb ends in an E, it's the one vowel that changes to an A if you add an N or a K to the front, okay? And then minique is the same way. It could be spelled differently. So instead I just did 2 examples, but again, it ends in an E, so the E would change. So we have 2 rules. If it ends in a vowel, add the sound of n to both sides. Or if it ends in E, change the E to an A, then add the sound of n to both sides. And that's how we would conjugate it for one S, the first person, like me. So let's go through these. Mich so is to eat. So we add n to both sides, we get n mich sun. Mich sun. Mnique is to drink. We add n, the sound of n to both sides, but it ends in an E, so we change that to an A, and we get neminiquan, nminiquan. Nehioe again ends in an E, so we're going to have a change to an A, nehioan. It's really easy, really, right? We're just adding the sound of n to both sides. We're like wrapping the word in the sound of n to express that me, the person who's talking, is involved with the action. So nipimpahtan, nipimohtan, again the E changes. But if we can remember these rules and we can get the proper base form of the verb, that's it. That is VAI verbs in a nutshell. If you wanted to conjugate it for second person, you simply start it with k instead of n, but you end it in n, the sound of n. I'm trying to get away from using the letters here because if you can think in words as sounds, sometimes people find that easier. So let's do it with kmichsun, so k, michsun, k, miniquan, again the A changes, k, neheo wan, the A changes, k, pimpatan, k, pimotan, and the E changes there again. So if we can think of these big conjugation charts and we have to add all this and we add the suffix, or we can simply say, okay, if I'm going to talk about me, I have to wrap the word in n, and if I'm going to talk about you, I have to start it with k and I have to end it with n. And then the only other thing we have to remember is that the E changes, and we can literally conjugate any VAI verb in Cree. And then there are 3 other verb types, and they have similar type. What these are, they're phonetic rules, right? They're rules based on sound instead of based on grammar or based on how the word is used, which is grammar. These are trying to learn the rules based on sound, and a person can get pretty far doing it this method. They can get pretty far pretty fast, and then once they get used to using the words, then they can hone back in on the grammar. This is also just an alternate path. The other path works as well. It's just another way to look at it. So yeah, let me know if anyone's brave enough. Feel free to run through a list of these verbs, conjugating them for 1S and 2S.
All right, now let's have some fun. So anything that ends in a vowel, we add n and n at the end to make it that we're doing, right? So mich so, we add nemich sun, n, mich so, n. Right, so it ends in a vowel. We add an N to the front and an N to the end. But if it ends in an E, that E changes to an A, right? So minique, niminiquan, nehioe, ne neheoan, or ne nehioan. Okay, so that's a rule based on the sound at the end of the verb. We have another type of verb that ends in and that is going to change to an ain, and the rest of the part of the word is going to get copied over. So in the dictionary, wapenum means she or he throws it, and it's something specific and it's something inanimate. And if you look at the colors, we copy the yellow and the orange into the blank, and then the part that's in green gets replaced with the part that's in green. So if we take wapenum, we put it in and we get newapenain, as in I throw something specific, like newapenain te tapuin, I throw the chair. Okay. And we can change it for you, like you throw it, if we put a K in the front. So kiwapenain, you throw the chair. And of course, the form that we have there, wapenum, is actually the third person singular form. She or he throws it, something specific like a chair. So wapenum te tapuin is she or he throws a chair. And so what we can realize from this is the part that's circled in green, or in the green box, is the only part that changes. And this all hooks on to that N. So, newapenain, kiwapenain, wapenum, nechachkenain, kichachkenain, chachkenum, nechistenain, kichistenain, chistenum, nitigateinen, kitigateinen, igatenam. Watch that one. It starts with a vowel, so you have to put a T in front. So we go nt, igateinen, nitigateinen, kitigateinen, igatenam. And then to close it, nikippenein, kikippenein, kippenam. So the rule is, if it ends in add an N or a K to the front, or nothing, depending on who you're talking about, and then change to en. And you can think of that in two ways. You can think of it as adding an N to and getting ein, or you can think of it simply as substituting for ein, whichever works best for you. But this is so what we know here is anything that ends in that the short am, that morpheme, is what tells that we're talking about something inanimate and something very specific, like a specific inanimate thing that we're talking about. So, nuepenam pakatuan. That's animate. Nuepenein mistigoat. I'm throwing a box. Nichachkenein mistigoat. I'm poking a box. Nichistenein mistigoat. But just be aware, when we have this that ends in we have to be specific about what we're talking about. Now, that can be contextually insinuated. So if you and I are talking about a box and I say nuepenein, it's like me saying I throw it, but it is actually the box. So you know that I'm specifying the box. It's not just like I'm throwing things in general. It's something very specific. So just to go over that again, anything that ends in a vowel, we simply add N. If it ends in an E, we change the E to an A and we add N for ni and ki. And then when we have a word that ends in we swap out the and we put ein, like E-N. And then if it's third person, we just leave the And for instance, and for these ones, if it's third person, we just put a W. So if it ends in a vowel, you add a W. If it ends in that's the third person form. I hope that helps. If you have any questions or you want clarification on any of this, please shoot me a video or shoot us a video, and I'll try and clarify it even more. Because if that all makes sense, we're going to move on to the even more fun ones, where we can start throwing each other, or I can start throwing you, or you can start throwing me, and all the rest of that fun stuff. So let me know if any of this doesn't make sense. Otherwise, we'll keep on cruising tomorrow. Have a good night.
Good morning, everyone. So this is our lesson from last time, and I apologize because I missed a few days. But again, we take weipe, which is the throw part, the n, which means our hand, and then we add am to mean something inanimate is what takes the action. So she or he throws it. But we can take these same words from this frame, and if we look here, we take off the and we get weipe in. From there, we can add different endings to say I threw someone or they threw me. And so if we take the same words from last week but we cut off the then all of a sudden we can just add these green parts that will tell which direction the action is. So we know weipe is to throw and n is by hand, so weipe in is to throw something. But if we take off the am that we learned from yesterday, and instead in the green part we put long AW, I'm using Wapamau as an example here. So no Wapamau, most people know that, I see him or her. If we take those same two endings and we put weipe in the middle and we get Nuwapenau, it means I throw him or her. Or Kiwapenau, you throw him or her. Or Wapenao, she or he throws him or her. And so what we see is from this, they're the exact same words without the so it's not, if we want to talk about an inanimate object, we have to add this and then change how we conjugate the word. But if we want to talk about an animate object, influencing an animate object, we just add in these pieces to either side of the word plus the piece in orange. So take a crack at that. I'll read through them all here real quick. Nuwapenau, Kiwapenau, Wapenao, Nichachkanau, Kichachkanau, Chachkanao, Kichistanau, Nichistanau, Kichistanau, Chistanao, Nitigatenau, Kitigatenau, Igatenao, Nikippenau, Kikippenau, Kippenao. So yeah, that's all I have for today. Do you want to add anything?